Hey, what's up guys, Mark Burnett here and welcome back to my new world building series, Developing the World of Chroma Island. In this second episode, we're going to take a look at one of the first unique characters, which is going to be the Red Princess, also known as the Crimson Princess. So let's get started. Alright, so starting here with the base sketch, so the baseline art, which is going to be the very first step that I do most of the time. So when it's something that needs to be really quick, you know, like a speed paint, something like that, I usually don't spend the time to work with layers, don't spend the time to work on my line art, so I'll start with just colors right away. But for things in general that take more time, that take more planning, having multiple layers and starting with a line art and kind of tackling the task, you know, in different steps, is very important, and so I highly recommend that you do the same, you know, if it's something that you're trying to plan out a little bit more. But anyways, before I start about kind of like the technical aspect of this character here, of this painting, I want to well, first make sure that you check out the first video, because a lot of what I'll be talking about here about the Crimson Princess, which is a unique character, part of the Red People's clan. A lot of that stuff, a lot of the context for those people is explained in the first video. And so if you want this to make a little bit more sense, highly recommend that you check that out. And then in the last part of the video, we'll be talking about kind of how to finish a painting. So this is something a lot of people seem to struggle with, you know, when it comes to time to wrapping up a painting. What are the final steps, the final bits of polish that you can add to really, you know, call it done and be satisfied with it? And so we'll get to that a little bit later. But first, back to the Crimson Princess and a little bit about her background. So she is the princess of the Red People. Now, what does that exactly mean? Because the Red People don't function as a monarchy. It's just a title that they give to some of their red females. Now, it doesn't happen often. There's never more than one at the same time, and sometimes the tribe can go a very long time without one. And why are they so special? It's something that some of the females are born with, and nobody can explain, nobody's really sure. I'm not sure why some of them are born like that, but it's a special power that some of them have at birth, which allows them to control the crystal on their forehead more than the others can. Now, the average red female will kind of just, you know, age normally, and after 20-30 years, something like that, the crystal on their forehead is going to will have grown large enough that it will be overwhelming for the female, and then as a result they transform into a berserk female if left unattended. But those that have the potential to become a red princess, such as the Crimson Princess here, they're different. And their special ability allows them to control, to contain the overwhelming power, the usually overwhelming power that comes from hosting a mature crystal, and instead they can direct that energy, direct that power for their own good, and so they become a lot more powerful as a result, and oftentimes a lot more powerful than any of the living males. Now, what this means for her appearance is that she's going to be kind of an in-between state between a regular red female and a berserk red female, but she'll be in complete control over her actions, and so she's going to have longer horns than regular females. She's going to have a slightly bigger crystal, and that crystal is going to keep growing as she gets older and older. And with that crystal's growth also comes the additional power that it gives her. Now, each of them are, you know, free to choose what they want to do with that power, and the Crimson Princess is kind of a badass, so she never wanted to kind of be pampered, she never wanted to just relax with her life. She wanted to take part, she wanted to try and lead the tribe as best as she could, and so she's taken up the role of a male, or more specifically, her role is to contain the berserk female and of course extract, you know, the crystals from their forehead. Now, I can easily imagine that in the past, in the distant past, you know, previous princesses might not have been like her, so maybe some of them were kind of evil. Maybe one of the previous princess chose to use that power, use the extra power that comes from an overgrown crystal at the expense of her tribe. So maybe she was kind of a dictator or something like that. She was like ordering the other people around, and nobody could say anything because they were weaker than her, even the strongest of the males, the eldest males. But hey, who knows? We're not in the past, we're in the present. And so she is one of the good guys in a way because she contributes her strength, her time, her precious time on Earth. Because even though she can control and kind of contain the power of the crystal, she will still eventually, transform. And not only that, but when she does transform, she is going to be quite the monster. So I'm guessing that in her case, she's probably going to just sacrifice herself when she senses it coming. Now, when it comes to her background story, there's really two more things that I want to cover. One of them is going to be her weapons, right? So what does she use to defend herself? What does she use to beat her enemies? And that is going to be the energy that she can control around her arms, around her hands, and kind of mold that energy into whatever she wants. So generally speaking, what they are going to do, and her, including the males as well, they are just going to transform those into, like sword-like shapes or just big claws and things like that. In her case, she just transforms them into claws, and that's how she fights. And that energy is something that is given to them by the big flying orb, their life orb, and how good you can actually control that energy just depends on how old you are, really. So the elder males are pretty good at that. And in the case of the Crimson Princess, since she is quite old compared to all the other females in the tribe, she's also able to control that energy quite well. And then the second thing I want to talk about is her gems, her crystals, right, on the armor and the thing that's on her forehead. So where do those come from? It's not something that they have themselves, because the red people are very much like parasites wherever they go. So they take and they use for themselves. They use the things for their own benefit. And those crystals are the same crystals that give birth to the green people. So it's fair to think that, maybe on the previous island or in a different world, wherever they came from, they probably used different types of crystals, maybe different colors, and I was granting them maybe different powers, or I don't know. But in this case, those green crystals were stolen from the green people. Red peoples can grow the green crystals, but they can create them. So when the females act as a host for the crystals, they take a very small crystal, and over time that crystal will grow and will be able to create more red people, right? And the bigger the crystal, the more red people are born out of it. If a red female's life is cut short, when the crystal is still too small, in that case, nobody can be born out of it. And so they have two ways to reproduce. They can either keep growing those crystals, or they can steal them. Now the crystals are pretty rare, and it's like precious stones for us, but even more rare than that. And they are extremely well protected, as you can imagine. This is what the green people are born out of, and so they protect that stuff with their life. But something happened in the past, and some of it was stolen, which is what the red people now use as their life source as well. And not only that, but the Crimson Princess uses it as decoration on her armor. That's just how big of a deal she is, right? So she can take those crystals that are there to actually give life to others, and she's just wearing them as just a sign of status. And so I'm pretty much done with the design at this point. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover when it comes to her background story. This is the Red Princess, right? This is a Crimson Princess, one of a kind. And so I wanted the design to really emphasize all of those things. So I wanted her to look like she's clearly different from the other red people, from the other red females. She looks more aggressive. She's got bigger horns. Her crystal that she's hosting is really big. It's starting to impact her looks a little bit. And beyond that, she is just one of the most important person in the tribe, and shows she is well decorated as a result. Very similar to what they would do in medieval times, and how well they decorated the armor of royalty, right? How intricate it was and how expensive it was. But yeah, anyways, this is it for her background story, and now we're going to move on to to the bit that I wanted to talk about, which is going to relate to finishing a painting. So when we have something like this, right? A character that looks pretty final, it could be cleaned up a little bit, but when do you stop? What can you add to make this piece shine some more in your portfolio, if it's going to be a portfolio piece? And how do you take this to the next level and really call it done? Well, I'm going to jump in there, and we'll take a look at what we can do to improve and kind of add the final bits of polish to this piece. And by the way, if you want to learn this stuff, if you want to learn how to design characters or learn any other types of art skill, I really highly recommend that you check out my QBrush store, where I have a ton of tutorials, a ton of courses, one specifically about character design, and I'll put the link in the description below, or you can check it out in the top right corner of the video right here. Alright, now back in Photoshop, and this is kind of the image that I have so far. So there's a couple things that I could do to that to make it shine some more. Let's take a look at a couple things that we can do that are fairly quick, that can add a lot of pop to this, a lot of wow factor to it. So in my case, the first thing will be to add some sort of a background, because I'm trying to tell a story, right? With these characters, I want them to be situated not only within a story, but a world. And so I want the location where they are to communicate as well. Not to say that you should have that, you know, if it's a concept, if you're focusing more on character design and not so much on the illustration quality of the piece that you're working on, then having no background is probably better, because then the viewer will need to focus, or won't have a choice but to focus on the character itself. So with that said, in my case, I prefer to have a background. So what I'm going to do is add something real quick first. So this was just a part of the 3D, part of the block out that I shared in the previous video. And so it's super simple. As you can see, it's just kind of a really blocked out shapes, so super simple houses that I kind of just laid out in Maya and just quickly rendered and then really quickly painted over. So it's still really messy. But what I want to do with that is this, right? So let me change the orders. I'm gonna make it a little bit easier. So what I did really is just tinted blue, so that's kind of like nighttime, and so that she pops some more. Again, her colors are really warm colors, and the background is cooler colors, and so we already get that foreground background feel with just the colors themselves, because cooler colors create distance and warmer colors always appear closer. If it were the opposite, if her palette was more cool and the background was warmer, the effect wouldn't be as good. She wouldn't pop out as much. And by blurring the background, it also emphasizes her over the background, because now the background is kind of out of focus. So if it's out of focus, it's hard for us to focus on it, right? It makes sense. So in her case, on top of that, I quickly added just like a shadow here at the base, as you can see. Not really needed, but it's always great, you know, if she's kind of laying on the ground or if she's standing up on something, to have some sort of indication that she's grounded, that she's not just floating in the air. And there's going to be 3 more things that I add onto that. So shadow is always very important. That's the one that really is the most visible, and the shadows affect the volumes, right? So it helps bring this character that looked otherwise a little bit flat. So by having kind of the shadow right underneath here, casted by the arm, we understand that the arm is above the body, and we just understand the order of things a little bit better, and it overall just easier to read the different volumes. So shadow, really important. And the way I do it, super simple, is just a layer on multiply. And what I do is I select kind of this thing right here. So I select the shape that I have, and then I'm just going to add a blue tint. So a blue color like this everywhere. And then I'll set that layer to multiply, and all I have to do then is to erase bits of it to reveal the light underneath. So I really like to keep that for the end, because it's quite a rewarding step. You know, it's a lot of fun to kind of reveal the light this way. And so yeah, that's what I had here, and then you just set that to multiply. And of course, you know, the color of the shadow can be whatever you want. Usually light blue works quite well, but you know, it can be any kind of cool color, so maybe purples or bluish greens. Then once you have your shadows, I like to add an extra layer on top, and that layer is just set to normal, and that is going to be for the final polish. On, off, on. So a little bit of smoke down here. Honestly, I could have detailed her feet a little bit better than that, but yeah, maybe I'll do that later. And if I zoom in, we can see what changes here. So a little bit extra details here on the arm. Just refining the details overall, making sure everything is really clear, that it reads well. A couple extra highlights here. A lot of that stuff goes to hiding kind of the line art, which I still have in here, right? So I didn't erase the line art or anything like that. I always like to leave it and just paint over it over time so that it slowly just disappears. And this final step here is definitely contributing to that. My focus for the polish is really around my focal point. So the focal point for any character, or most of the time for character, is going to be the face. So the face here is going to be the place that most people's eyes land on the first time they look at a character design like this. And so what I want to make sure is that the details around the face are as crisp as possible. And then as we move away from that, it's not so important. It's not nearly as important to have those details kind of carry through, because the majority of the attention of the viewer is going to be in this area here. And most of the time people won't even look directly at anything else. So as we move away from the focal point, the details get a little bit looser because it's just not needed. Trying to put your energy where people will actually notice it. And then sometimes, I'll do a small color tweak. So in this case, I just wanted to knock down the saturation a little bit. And so that color tweak is basically just a little bit of a color balance to make everything a little bit warmer, and then just vibrant. So it's a little bit less vibrant, but that's about it. Not much different. And then finally, the last step is always glow. So for the glow layer, that's the thing that goes on top of everything else. It's the very final layer that I add. And I just usually set it to hard light because it works pretty well. And this is what it does. All right, so it's just a little bit of a glow where the lights should be, should be more visible. So on things that are super shiny, so the gold parts here. For the arm, we have this sort of, purple energy, pink energy, and so that is glowing as well. It's emitting a light. And we get the same thing here around the horns, the face, and the crystals. So that's it. So one thing that you can quickly do once you're done with that, and once you save this image, so here I just saved it as a JPEG. And so we have the same image, but flattened now. So we only have one layer. And the final thing I like to do to this image is just to test. So I probably won't change anything, but I like to do these three things here. So the Photoshop auto tone, auto contrast, auto color. And I say I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to actually leave them on most of the time, but it's just to see how far away from a correct, quote unquote, correct photo this illustration is. And so I start, just from the top here, auto tone. And so I can see now that my background could use to be a little bit darker for this image to be more balanced. Point taken. The next, contrast. So same thing here, increase contrast and auto color. So I really don't like this. Sometimes auto color is a little bit off. I like my colors to be super vibrant, and yeah, I prefer this a lot better. But I think the auto tone was onto something. So auto tone, auto contrast. So what I'm going to do is go and adjust the contrast a little bit. So I'm going to increase the contrast for this. Maybe drop the brightness just a tad. Yeah, I think this actually works better. So now the character reads, definitely pops some more. So it's not as much as Photoshop's telling me that it would like it, but I think that works better than what we had before. And so I'm going to keep it like that. Sometimes, depending, I might also do one final thing, which is going to be a lens correction here, which really only adds the vignette around the character. So I'm going to go here in custom vignette and drop that a little. And we can see here on the outside of the image, the effect that this has. All right, so pretty good. So I'm going to keep that, but just erase the parts here where there's supposed to be a light. I'm going to get rid of that. And now I think it's pretty good. Before, after. So just again, it wraps the character a little bit more, bring the focus on her a little bit more. And now I would be happy with this illustration and I would call this done. So really quickly again, to recap, we start from here. So something that looks pretty final, but it clearly makes a difference, right? So that looks all right, but this looks final. This looks polished. And it didn't take much time, it's just a couple details left and right, and those in order are first background, then shadows, polish, color tweaks if needed, final glow, and there we have it. So there we go, guys. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was somewhat entertaining. And before I wrap up this video, check down in the comment section because I am going to be asking you guys what I should work on for the next video. So I'll put 2 options in there and I'll go with the one that has the most votes. So please let me know what you're interested in and make sure you tune in next week. So hit that subscribe button, that bell button as well to be notified as soon as the next video comes out. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you guys next time.